Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zhu Lanhui from Nanyang Normal University. The title of my presentation is The Logical, Semantic, and Tactic Analysis of Chinese Explaining Flowing Sentences, the Systemic Functional Linguistics and Proto-Royal Logic Perspective. Chinese flowing sentences in Chinese is called 流水句. It refers to a type of sentence which contains two or more than two clauses. These clauses semantically relate to each other without the help of conjunctions. And the Chinese explaining flowing sentences means that the semantic relationship between two clauses in Chinese flowing sentences is that one clause explains another clause. Now let's look at two examples to get a better idea. Example 1 is a Chinese explaining flowing sentences. The bold-faced part 生气不超过5分钟 is an explaining clause. It explains the nominal group family rule in its preceding clause, which has been underlined. And in example 2, it is the same here. Example 2 is also a Chinese explaining flowing clause. The bold-faced clause explains a nominal group in the underlined clause, one important function. And so the bold-faced clause is an explaining clause, and the underlined clause is an explained clause. The semantic relationship between these two clauses is that one clause explains another one. But there is a little difference between these two explaining clauses in example 1 and in example 2. In example 1, the explaining clause did not start with 就是, while the explaining clause in example 2 starts with 就是. So this just led to a research question of this study, which is what is the difference between the explaining clauses with and without 就是 in terms of logical semantic relationship and interdependent relationship with their preceding clauses. In terms of this 就是 in this Chinese explaining clause, one study was carried out in 2002 by a Chinese scholar, Zhang, and Zhang claimed that 就是 in this Chinese explaining clause did not function as an adverb and a copular anymore, but have grammaticalized and function as a conjunction. And Zhang also claimed that since 就是 here is a conjunction, it can be deleted. But the problem is, if 就是 is deleted here, the meaning of the sentence will be changed, and the two clauses cannot semantically relate to each other anymore, which means the bold-faced clause and the underlined clause will fall apart. This may suggest that it is not proper to regard 就是 as a conjunction. Maybe 就 still functions as an adverb and 是 still functions as a copula. And just because 是 still functions as a copula, 是 could semantically relate these two clauses together. And this just led to another research question of this study. If 就是 is still an adverb plus a copula, how is the clause with 就是 in Chinese explaining flowing sentences logically and interdependently connected to its preceding clause? In order to answer these two research questions, spoken data was used. That is because, as Halliday argued, only in spoken language and specifically in natural spontaneous interaction that the full semantic potential of the system is brought into play. And the spoken data chosen for this study came from a famous talk show in China entitled Dates with Lu Yu, and 50 interviews have been randomly selected and transcribed for the preparation of this study. In order to carry out this analysis, this study adopted two theories. One is systemic functional linguistics (SFL), and the other is Proto-Royal logic (PRL). And now I will introduce introduce the complex clause system in SFL first, and then I will come to PRL. In SFL, Halliday and Matheson argued that two clauses can form a complex clause through two subsystems simultaneously. One is taxis, the other is the logical semantic relationship. By taxis, it means that the status where two clauses are. Specifically speaking, two clauses in a complex clause can be at equal status, which is called parataxis in SFL. And these two clauses will be marked with Arabic numbers according to the order of their appearance. Or two clauses in a complex clause can also be at unequal status, and which is called, this unequal status is called hypotaxis, and these two clauses will be marked with alpha. Now the main clause will be marked with alpha, and the dependent clause will be marked with beta, gamma, etc. In terms of logical semantic relationship, it means that one clause can semantically elaborate, extend, or enhance another clause. By elaborating, it means that one clause explains or describes or restates or provides more details to another clause, and the equal sign will be used to mark this elaborating relationship between two clauses in SFL. Now let's look at an example here. This example is a complex clause, and the underlined clause is a main clause. Because this underlined clause can stand alone, the meaning is complete. While the bold-faced clause is a dependent clause because without the main clause, the meaning of the bold-faced clause is not complete. So the bold-faced clause must depend on the main clause. That's why the underlined clause is marked with alpha and the bold-faced clause is marked with beta to show this hypotactic relationship between these two clauses. And from the meaning, we can see that the bold-faced clause explains a nominal group, George Plimpton, in the main clause. Therefore, the logical semantic relationship between the bold-faced clause and the underlined clause is elaborating. Since the bold-faced clause since the bold-faced clause hypotactically depend on the main clause and also elaborates the main clause, so the bold-faced clause can be called a hypotactic elaborating clause in SFL terms, or non-restricted relative clause or non-defining relative clause in traditional terms. Now let's come to Port Royal logic. Arnold and Nicol also provided a detailed discussion of non-restricted relative clause. But in PRL, proposition is used instead. Simply speaking, the discussion of non-restricted relative clause in PRL can be seen from three perspectives. One is the difference between the main proposition and the explicative subordinate proposition. The other is the scope, and the last one is the relative pronouns. In PRL, main proposition means the proposition that is main proposition refers to the proposition that is what is mainly affirmed, while a subordinate proposition refers to a proposition that is not what is mainly affirmed. Since the subordinate proposition is not what is mainly affirmed, whether it is true or not does not affect the truth of the main proposition. By explicative, it means that this subordinate proposition explains or develops the whole main proposition or a nominal group in the proposition. Now let's look at an example. In this example, the underlined part is a main proposition because Alexander defeated the rest is what is mainly affirmed. Well, the bold-faced part, the bold-faced proposition is a subordinate proposition because it is not what is mainly affirmed. Since the bold-faced part is not what is mainly affirmed, even if Alexander was not the most generous of kings, it wouldn't affect the truth that Alexander defeated the rest. In terms of scope, according to PRL, the explicative subordinate proposition only explains or develops the main proposition or a nominal group in the main proposition, but does not restrict their scope. And this just led to a very interesting phenomenon, which is that the nominal group or the whole proposition developed by the explicative subordinate proposition can replace the relative pronoun and form a complete clause with the rest of this explicative subordinate proposition. So we can get Alexander was the most generous of kings. In terms of the relative pronouns, both Halliday and Matheson and Arnold and Nicholl argued that whether a clause is a hypothetical elaborating clause or not, whether a proposition is an explicative subordinate proposition or not, it is not decided by the appearance of the relative pronouns. Now I'm going to present the analysis and the findings of my study. And example 3 was extracted from the data of this study as a representation. And this is a Chinese flowing sentence. And from the meaning, we can see the bold-faced clause restates the underlined clause. And so the logical semantic relationship between these two clauses, the bold-faced one and the underlined one, is elaborating. And also we can see that both of these clauses can stand alone. The meaning of each one is complete without another clause. And also in Chinese we can say 有时他干不好我还批评他我还吵他 or we can also say 有时他干不好我还吵他我还批评他 which means we can switch the places of these two clauses, the underlined one and the bold-faced one, without changing the meaning of the sentence. So these two clauses are at equal status, which is parataxis, which is the paratactic relationship. And now let's move on to another example, which was also chosen from the data of this study. And in this example, the logical semantic relationship between the bold-faced clause and the underlined clause is also elaborating because the bold-faced clause explains or provides more details to a nominal group, warehouse keeper, in the underlined clause. To the underlined clause. So the logical semantic relationship between these two clauses is elaborating. But different from example 1, the tactic relationship between these two clauses in example 4 is hypotactic because these two clauses cannot switch places without changing the meaning of the sentence. Because in Chinese we can say 因为我开始是搬运工，然后是仓库保管员，就是百货公司的 ，but we cannot say 因为我开始是搬运工，然后是百货公司的。就是仓库保管员 It doesn't make any sense. And without this main clause, this the bold-faced clause does not make any sense, and the meaning of the bold-faced clause is not complete. So the bold-faced clause must depend on the main clause, which makes the two clauses are at equal, which makes the two clauses be at equal status, be at unequal status, which is hypothetical. So this since this bold-faced clause explains or elaborates its preceding clause and also has a hypothetical relationship with its preceding clause, therefore the bold-faced clause in example 4 is a hypothetical elaborating clause. And now I would like to from the perspective of PRL, the underlying proposition is a main proposition because it is what is mainly affirmed. But the bold-faced proposition is not a proposition. It is a subordinate proposition because it is not what is mainly affirmed. Because even if the warehouse keeper is not a warehouse keeper of a department store, it does not affect the truth that the speaker was a warehouse keeper before. And also from the meaning, we can understand that the bold-faced proposition explains or develops the nominal group in the main proposition. So the bold-faced part is an explicative subordinate proposition. Also, according to PRL, the explicative subordinate proposition and the nominal group developed by this explicative subordinate proposition can form a complete clause. So we can get 仓库保管员是百货公司的，或者仓库保管员是百货公司的仓库保管员。The warehouse keeper is a warehouse keeper from a department store. And now I would like to conclude my presentation. This study was triggered by the research question of whether explaining clauses in Chinese flowing sentences with and without 就是 have the same tactic and logical semantic relationship with their preceding clauses. In order to answer this question, the theories from SFL and PRL were used, and the findings showed that the explaining clauses with and without 就是 have the same logical semantic relationship with their preceding clauses, which is elaborating, but do not have the same tactic relationship with their preceding clauses. Without 就是 the explaining clauses and their preceding explained clauses have a paratactic relationship, but with 就是 the explaining clauses and their preceding explained clauses have a hypotactic relationship. Based on this analysis, the explaining clauses with 就是 in Chinese flowing sentences are actually hypotactic elaborating clauses or non-defining relative clauses or non-restricted relative clause in traditional terms. And this finding just challenges the claim made by previous studies, which stated that Mandarin Chinese does not have hypotactic elaborating clauses, and because the previous studies argued that the reason that the Chinese language does not have hypotactic elaborating clauses is because Mandarin Chinese does not have relative pronouns. But as I have stated, both Halliday and Matheson, Arnold, and Nico argued that whether this clause is a hypotactic elaborating clause or not, whether this proposition is an explicative subordinate proposition or not, it is not decided by the relative pronouns. And hopefully, the findings of this study can be of benefit to related fields such as linguistic studies of the Chinese language, Chinese English translation, and Chinese teaching and learning. And here are some main references of this study. And that's the end of my presentation. And thank you very much for your attention.